Erev Tov L'Kulam. I want to thank Susan and Bernie Wolf for sponsoring this biography of the Aderet. And it's Le'ilu Nishmat, Bernie's mother, Raphael Bat Moshe Yitzchak, that she should have an Aliyah B'Gan Eden, amongst other things or other reasons, b'schut, the contribution to the Dvar Torah. So the Gadol that we're speaking about today is as you can see from the heading, is Rabbi Eliyahu David Rabinowitz Teomim, who was he's just known as the Aderet. That's Roshei Tevot, and he was born in 1843, and he passed away in 1905. And he was also became to be the father-in-law of Rav Kook. Rav Kook married his daughter, and after that daughter passed away also very young, she was about 22 years old, then the Aderet had a twin brother, and he had a daughter, and the Aderet convinced Rav Kook that he should marry his niece, which he did. So Rav Kook was connected to the family 2 times over. So let's start off with, first of all, he was such an amazing gadol that Rav Kook wrote a book. One of the first books that he wrote was called Eder HaYakar, and he dedicated this book of Eder HaYakar, which literally means, it comes from the Tanakh. Eder HaYakar means a prestigious fortress, and it's about Talmidei Chachamim, the greatness of Talmidei Chachamim, and what their influence is on Am Yisrael. And in a preface to this book on Eder HaYakar, he quotes from a midrash which says that the Jewish people are compared to a bird. A bird has to fly with its wings, but what are the wings of the Jewish people? Those are the great Talmidei Chachamim. So he uses the book to not only must be about his father-in-law, the Aderet, but what he do is to address the problems that there were at the time of Zionism, of the Haskalah, of communism. All those things caused a decline in the spiritual stature of the Jewish people. And how do we get out of it? Well, sometimes the only way that we can get out of it is through connecting to the Gedolei Yisrael, which they are our wings, which cause Am Yisrael to be able to fly on high. So he was born in 1843. He was a twin, and his twin brother was Rav Yehuda, and they had an amazing. I mean, He was born on Shavuot, and they were basically identical twins, but they had a tremendous love for one another. Rav Kook himself says it's hard to describe it, but these brothers, without even talking, they would anticipate. They were so close that they would anticipate each one's thoughts without even uttering a word. When he was young, in about when he was about 31 years old, at 1875, the Aderet went to, or was appointed a Rav in Ponevezh. In that time, Lithuania was teeming with was one gadol after the other, and it caused a stir because there wasn't people who took the rabbinate at the age of 31 in the bastion of Torah, and here you had this Aderet who did exactly that. So he became the Rav of Ponevezh in 1875. He was a prolific writer. He wrote 120 books. Some of the books are still found in Ponevezh of today in Bnei Brak, waiting to be edited. Rav Yehuda always felt that some of those manuscripts should go to him, as after all, it belonged to the Mishpacha, because Rav Kook was a son-in-law. Be that as it may, he was a prolific writer, and he used to encourage people to print. There's an interesting, I want to use the opportunity that there's an interesting Khatam Sofer that says that the Torah is made of Torah shebichtav, Torah sheba'al peh, and even though we are allowed to write Torah sheba'al peh, because the Gemara says at the end of Masechet Brachot that Eit la'asot Hashem eferu Toratecha, once there were so many tzarot to the Jewish people, it became impossible to retain Torah sheba'al peh orally, so it had to be written, unless otherwise it was going to be forgotten. So the Khatam Sofer, he says that it's only be written when it's for necessity. If it's not for necessity, then it reverts back to its original restrictions. Basically, all the Gdolim, they disagreed with the Khatam Sofer. It said if a person, for example, wants to get a doctorate on something, and he wants writing Divrei Torah, so not writing now Psak Halacha, he's doing an analysis for whatever reason, that's fine. And in fact, what the Aderet did was that he encouraged publishing, and what he would do is he would read every single book that came to him for a haskama, read it cover to cover, and then he would write a haskama, as I say, encouraging people to write Torah sheba'al peh. In 1893, he left to be the the Rav Emir. It was sort of like forced because he was so poor. And when the people of Ponevezh suddenly sort of realized, they were so like underpaying him, they were so like inverted commas, like using him in inverted commas. So they upped the salary. They urged him not to come, but he said, "I've made already a contract. I don't go back on my word," and that's how he ended up in going to Mir, but not for long, because 6 years later, in 1899, he went to Yerushalayim. The Rav of Yerushalayim at that time was Rav Shmuel Salant, and Rav Shmuel Salant asked the people in Lithuania, especially Rav Chaim Oizer, who was like the Rav in Vilna, to send someone to help him to be or to take over for being the Rav Rashi. And the person who was suggested was the Teomim, the Aderet, Rabbi Eliyahu David Rabinowitz Teomim, and that's how he went to Yerushalayim. Let's speak a little bit about, he didn't live a long time in Yerushalayim. He, like 6 years later, he passed away. But that's not before he actually urged his son-in-law, his former son-in-law, Rav Kook, to be the Rav of Yerushalayim, which he was much later. In 1905, Rav Kook had come to Yafo, but then afterwards, after staying in Yafo for a certain amount of time, he was asked to be the Rav Rashi of Yerushalayim, which he complied with. So we spoke about the Aderet, his amazing Gaonut. He was Rav Kook in this book Eder HaYakar. He speaks about that there's two types of Gaonim. There are people who they were blessed with Hashem with great talents, with great spirituality. And then there are people that Gaonim who became Gaonim mamash through tireless work. And he says his father-in-law combined both. He says he was a natural, gifted Gaon, but he didn't rely on that, but he was also Gaon in his diligence, which was something which was legendary. That's what made him so special. And Rav Kook, in this introduction to his book, Eder Yakar, which, as I said, is dedicated to his father-in-law, but it deals with the issues of atheism, the issues of problems in faith. And in that, Rav Kook says that how do we sometimes overcome these things? It's not we overcome them, like he quoted from the Gemara or the Midrash that I mentioned beforehand, about that the wings of the Jewish people are the Gedolei Yisrael. When the mentality of the people becomes low, when the mentality and the psyche of the people is only about like materialism, what causes? How do we get out of it? We have to soar higher. Well, how do we soar higher? With the Gedolei Yisrael. So now Rav Kook says the Gedolei Yisrael, sometimes not that they influence necessarily people through what they write, what they write, what they teach. It's sometimes they are a living embodiment of what the Torah really is, without even speaking or saying anything. They themselves are a living embodiment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that helps people who know about them and connect to them to have a mentality which is more spiritual, which not only focused on the here and now. I mean, if we look, for example, at in our generations of the Rav Moshes and Rav Abraham Shapira and the Lubavitcher Rebbe and a whole lot of Gedolim, the Rav Steinman, all these people, they were not, it's not only that people were influenced by what they said, but it's pashut. They're people who never read anything that they said, but they met with them, and just to get a brocha for them and to see them, that was enough to convince them that those people, they represent the victory that there is over the secular way of looking at life. They didn't have to read anything. They just had to see them, right? I remember when, just in parenthesis, that when Rav Kanevsky passed away, and then the president, Bougie Herzog, was in Chutz La'aretz, and he spoke to an Italian prime minister and just described to him how proud he is that he was a person that his whole time he learned Torah. This is how, and he described his piety. And this is what's impressive to a person who's got no idea of what that Italian prime minister happened to ask President Herzog, what is all this fuss about the funeral? So he spoke to him. That's what is our pride and joy, that we, the Jewish people, can produce such people. So let's speak a little bit about also his piety. He was a person who, and this is very, he said from a young age, when he was small, he said he couldn't stand, he hated and detested any expression of arrogance or any expression of kavod. And he writes over there that it's not because I'm that special, it's just something that I inherited automatically from my father, who was such a special person. Because his father, Behemet, Rabbi Yamin, was a person who was known as the Gonem, one of the Gonem of Lita. He was a person who walked for a lot of his life, some 20 or so years, always with tefillin tucked under his head, right? People couldn't see it, and tefillin on his arm. Now, why am I saying this? Not only because of his piety, but because, there's an interesting Gemara in Masechet Brachot. The Gemara over there says that Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Yirmiyah was once very, very happy, exceedingly happy, and Rabbi Zera, who was his teacher, his colleague, Talmid Chaver, More Chaver, he said to him, aren't you a little bit exaggerating in your simchas? He said, well, I'm wearing tefillin. You don't have to worry. Now the Gemara understands that the pashtut of the Gemara is that he was telling Rab Zera, you don't have to worry that I'm not in control, because I've got a controlling factor, and that is that I'm wearing tefillin. But actually, Rav Kook in his Sidur, when he speaks about, he mentions this Gemara, and he's got a different way in Eder HaYakar of interpreting this Gemara in light of the life of his father-in-law. He says that Aderet wore tefillin the whole time, and the whole time he was happy. He was happy because of the tefillin, not that the tefillin kept him in check. The tefillin was what was caused him to be happier. So the significance of what I'm saying is that when people are many times pious, it brings about a certain withdrawal from life. I mean, nothing major, but it's a certain detachment, a certain being austere. And that's exactly that's not how the Aderet was. The Aderet walked around with tefillin. He learned Yomam V'Layla. and he followed like the Gra, that the Gra said that when a person even thinks of Divrei Torah, then one has to also make Birkat Torah, which basically means that he never, as the Gemara Masachet Sotah says, he didn't go Daled Amot without thinking of Divrei Torah. He himself says that in one of his Ktavim. But again, the Chassidut of these people, of the Aderet, didn't cause a detachment of La Ba'adarabba, tremendous simcha. And his attachment to mitzvot were also exemplary because because of his great love of Hashem, he looked at every mitzvah as a way in which he was able, a rendezvous in which he was able to now express that love and connection to Hashem. I just want to end off one interesting thing that he writes, that he writes about how he many times, like, he cries because of the Tsar Hashchina. He thinks of all the pain that Hashem must be going through when he sees how Am Yisrael, so to speak, is suffering. So actually, on the night of the Seder, it's written that he, whenever he would get to the part where he she'amda, he would lift up the cup, and then he would start to cry. He would start to cry when he thought about all the tzarot and the persecutions from the time immemorial right to his time, where the persecutions, the pogroms, the killings of Jews, and b'chol we living. And so he used to cry like uncontrollably for a certain amount of time at the Seder. He writes that the Mishpacha found it a little bit embarrassing, but that was his Imo Anochi Betzara for the Jewish people and for Hashem. When I speak about all the, just in parenthesis, all the problems that there was, once he met once Rabbi Yisrael Salante in a train station in Vilna. He told Rabbi Yisrael not to, for whatever reason, must be careful not to daven, because a person who is caught davening in a train station, he was fined by the Russians for 25 ruble. 25 ruble in those days was basically a month's salary. So I mean that's the milieu, and that's the atmosphere in which they lived. When he passed away Gimel Adar. That's today, Friday. Friday is when it's his yahrzeit. And the amazing thing about it is his serenity when he passed away. His calmness. He passed away at night. He knew he wasn't going to last the day. And he recited the psukim of Tefillin. He knew he couldn't put on Tefillin, but at least he wanted to recite the inyanim of the psukim of Tefillin, as if then he put on Tefillin. And the calmness, the beauty in his face, the serenity. From here we learned also that a person, it's not only the Gdolei Yisrael, not only about how to live, but also how to return one's soul to one's maker. Yezichro Baruch, Bezrat Hashem on Shabbat. I see that the time's gone on like a lot. I'll just tie up some of one of the two things that he said on Parsha Shavua. So call to everybody, and Shabbat Shalom.